But I'm excited because the release of the long-awaited book that I've been working on for the last year is finally released today on Amazon. And I wanted to share that and then read a little bit of excerpts from the book as first chapter. But the book is called Healing the Inner Brat. And the title is, well, abandonment, shame, trauma, unworthiness. Break free from the past, healing the inner child, aka the inner brat. So I'll let this queue up for another minute or two, but the book released today on Amazon, and it's a powerful self-reflection and journey of how that little inner child inside of you, how it impacts you, as you go into your elementary school stages and junior high school and high school, and all the different trauma points that happen, and whether it's from your parents or from being bullied or disappointments. This book is going to not only correlate the trauma and how it impacts your inner child and how it impacts you as an adult. Healing the inner brat slash child, man, you got to get this book. I'm not just saying this, but it's a deep discussion, profound. And you know what I've come to realize as I was writing this book is, you know, when you think about people that go to therapy or go back and reflect on their life and the problems that they have, and whether it's people that struggle with unworthiness or shame, trauma. You know, a lot of this goes back to your inner child. It goes back to that little boy or girl inside of you that didn't feel safe. And because you didn't feel safe, what happens is you carry that hurt, fear, resentment, abandonment, you carried with you into adulthood. And then when you wonder why you struggle with your relationships, you wonder why you can't hold on to a partner. You wonder why you can't connect with your kids. How can you connect with your kids when you can't even connect with yourself? So for those of you joining, this is a book called Healing the Inner Brat that just came out today that I wrote. It's on Amazon. And we dive deep. We dive deep into how it impacts you. And yes, question said, are you Mexican? Yes, parents are from Mexico. And speaking of Mexico, this talks about cultural differences, about how your ancestral lineage, about how cultural differences and how they show up, how they can impact you. I have 3 girls, so my daughters are 20, 22, and 28. And we're on a journey of healing because I was that piece of shit father. I was that narcissist. I was the father that would not allow his girls to cry. You know why my girls couldn't cry? Because it showed weakness. That was my mindset. My ego and masculine was so strong that I didn't allow my girls to cry. They could not show emotion because in my mind, I was raising strong, independent little girls that were going to be strong, independent women, not realizing that all along, I was fucking them up. I was my children's first bully. Not going to get emotional. I was my children's first bully. Here I thought I was doing the right thing by raising strong, independent women. But you know what I was doing is I was giving them PTSD. So much to the point that my children struggled psychologically, emotionally. I didn't provide a emotionally safe home for my kids. And it starts even before that. You know, it's funny because the first chapter of this book that I wrote, if you can read that, if not, I'll read it. It's chapter 1, Inner Child Trauma Before Birth, Why Your Mommy and Daddy Issues Started before you even met. That's the first chapter of the book. It's the first chapter. You know, when my partner, when their mom became pregnant, I was 20 years old. You think I would have been excited to be a father? No. I was angry and upset. How many of you can relate to that, where you had this exciting news that you were pregnant, for you women out there, and then all of a sudden your partner is pissed. Pissed because it's going to disrupt their life. For me, it was, what do you mean you're pregnant? Why didn't you take better care of yourself? So here I am starting to instill blame on my partner, my children's mom at the time, because I was pissed because it was going to disrupt my plans. It was going to disrupt my plans, building the next business, becoming the next mayor of the city, as I was dabbling into politics. And I was fucking pissed. And it's sad to look back and think about how I didn't show up. Well, physically, I was there sometimes, but emotionally and psychologically, I wasn't present. And so when I started diving into my inner child trauma and the things that I experienced, I saw that there was a pattern and there was a cycle. You know, in the book, one of the first chapters I talk about is how the womb's greatest hits, how when the child is in the womb, and you think that that's a time where the fetus, the baby, is safe, and that's a time where you nurse them, and they feel peace and love. But that's not the case in a lot of relationships. In a lot of relationships, there's chaos that happens. There's a lot of arguing that happens, a lot of fighting, sometimes physical, emotional abuse. And you don't think that impacts the child inside of you? You don't think that impacts how the child's going to come out? You know, as I started doing the research and diving into how our actions impact children in the womb, I started looking at this domino effect of how this shows up. And how when we don't create that safe space for your partner who's holding your child, how there's going to be complications. And for me, I honestly feel, after doing all the research and trying to look at where this came from, my Tourette's, because I have Tourette's and it's something I've struggled with all my life, struggled with until I finally embraced it. My Tourette's came from, a big part of it came from the trauma that my mother experienced when she was pregnant. Now, for most of my life, I always thought that it was my father that was not present, that it was my father that chose not to be there for my mom to support her. Guess what? When I started doing fact checking before I released the book, I asked my mom, I said, hey, you know, so how did you feel during pregnancy? What were you going through? What was going through your mind? And boy, did she hit me with a ton of bricks when, when I was telling her the story, like, why didn't my dad show up? Why wasn't he there for me? She says, what do you mean your dad didn't show up for you? I says, yeah, when I was in your stomach. She says, he wasn't allowed to. I'm like, what do you mean he wasn't allowed to? She says, yeah, your grandma forbid me from seeing him. She says, I was young, I was 19, 20 years old, gonna be 20, and I was pregnant, and your dad wasn't the most ideal candidate to be a father. I was out there, partying in the streets and so forth. And your grandmother, she inflicted on me a lot of emotional and psychological abuse, verbal abuse. And it was a traumatic pregnancy because I had so much doubt and so many questions of, was I making the right decision? And when I started to look at this domino effect of how it started, I come to the realization that we don't have deep conversations with our mothers and fathers. It's almost like we're afraid because we don't want to unravel the family secrets. And Eli, I just saw that comment that you posted, and I'm glad you can relate also. I encourage you, if your mother or father is still alive, have these conversations with them, because once they die, what's going to die with them is that knowledge, that wisdom, those stories of how life was for them. How was life for them when they were young and then when they were becoming parents? And through this fact find checking that I did, I uncovered a lot. These stories I had in my mind. So, man, this book I encourage you to pick up, Healing the Inner Brat. Not only is it my story and how it correlates, how it's impacted me growing up, but it's other people's stories, because as I've been on this journey of coaching, I used to say it was just coaching fathers on how to heal the relationship with their children, but I've now started to coach a lot of women who are struggling with narcissist fathers or piece of shit partners that aren't showing up for their children. And this book not only shares how what happened in my family dynamics, but also how something as simple as being rejected in second grade by this little girl when I fell in love with her, and her turning her back on me and dismissing me, and the laughter and ridicule that happened in elementary school, how that started to shut me down. It turned off a light inside of me. So when we talk about inner child trauma, that little inner brat inside, it's trauma points that happen that impact you. And then you take that into your teenage years, you take that into adulthood, you take that into your relationships, you take that into being a mother or father. You know, it's no secret that I was a documented and validated gang member. And a lot of people ask, well, how did that come about when you had a pretty good upbringing? But you know, that challenge, that struggle started because in 8th grade, I got bullied by one boy. One boy that I look back now, man, I wish I would have just fucking cracked him in the face. But I'm not here to instill violence. I don't want YouTube to shut off my channel. So I'm not going to talk about how I should have beat the shit out of my bully. Yeah, let me get back on track here. But that incident, or those few incidents, what happened was it made me realize that I didn't want to be that little scared boy anymore. And from there started the next couple of years of dabbling in a street gang. Not something I'm proud of, not something that was one of my high moments in life, but it's something that made me feel safe. It's something that gave me an identity. It's something that made my little inner me feel protected. And so for you parents out there, it's important to pay attention to what's happening in your children's lives. It's important to pay attention to who their friends are and who they're hanging around with, and to have these discussions with them, to have these uncomfortable discussions to make sure that your kids aren't being bullied. Because I can't tell you how many people I'm working with, I'm coaching, whose kids are struggling with substance abuse, with heroin, crack, or cocaine. And a big part of that is an escape, and it's an escape from the bullying. And not just a physical bullying, but what about the social media bullying that's going on? Something I didn't have to deal with in my lifetime, but something my kids have had to deal with is the ugliness that happens on social media, and how people can just jump on and attack, and a lot of times anonymously. So in closing, just wanted to share that the book's out, Healing the Inner Brat. And if you want to break free from your past of abandonment, shame, trauma, unworthiness, get this book on Amazon. It's life-changing because not only does it connect the dots between your little inner child and how you show up now, it also gives you solutions and exercises to do to start to heal that part. And I'm going to pose you with a question as I wrap up this YouTube live. It's called Womb Visualization. You know, there's a workbook that's going to be coming out with this in the next couple of weeks. So the book came out today. Workbook comes out in 2 weeks. And it has a bunch of exercises that you can do and a lot of self-reflection. But one of the exercises I'm going to post onto you is womb visualization. I want you to close your eyes for a minute. And it doesn't have to happen now, but it comes later. And think about how when you were in your mother's womb, and what emotions do you think you felt? What do you think was going on? And then I want you to write that down. But then I also want you to write down, what do you think your mother was going through? What do you think she was experiencing? What was her mind state? How was she feeling emotionally and psychologically? And then if your mother is still around, ask her. Matter of fact, I would encourage you to do that exercise together and then compare notes, because what you think and what the actual truth is may be totally different. So with that, have an amazing Friday. As you can see, my inner child shows up with the elf on the shelf making these silly little poses, because part of my healing, a big part of my healing, has been reactivating the little child inside of me, little Eddie. So making sure I go out to the toy store and buy a toy every couple of months, making sure I go take walks at the park and even occasionally jump on the swings. I used to say when nobody's looking, I would get on the swings, but now I don't care. I want to embrace my inner child. Going and flying a kite and just being silly. And now starting to realize that my silliness is actually my safe zone, because that's me reconnecting with the little boy inside of me. And I encourage all of you to take the time to unravel through all that crap and shit in your mind and go back to your heart and go back and grab that little boy or girl inside and play with them and have fun and laugh and be happy. Have an amazing weekend.